If you can't be in the field chasing gun dogs, the next best thing is talking about it.
Join Wade and Thomas as we discover the people, the places, and the birds, and of course, the gun dogs that make upland hunting our passion.
This is the Setter Tales Podcast. Welcome back to another episode of the Setter Tales Podcast. I'm Thomas Heidenworth, my co-host over here, Wade Kistner. Episode 50. Can you believe that?
They said it wouldn't last.
So far, we're going strong, and we wouldn't be here without the people that help us. So first, we want to talk about Highland Hideaway Hunting down in Riverside. Ryan and family do an excellent job. It's the realism of their pheasant hunts is cool. You can hire a guide like Wade or I, or you can just go with your dog and do some excellent pheasant hunting, some chucker, and we're actually going to be down there this weekend, opening weekend for guiding, and with the Heroes Hunt that you put on every year, Wade, and we're excited about that.
Yeah, it should be a good time. We're going to have 30 our law enforcement officers down there, retired and active, and going to have great weather. Yeah, that's the thing this time of year we always worry about. The temperatures can be a little bit warm, but it's going to be 59 and no rain on Saturday. So
yeah,
so it's going to be a good weekend, and so we're looking forward to that.
I'd actually be welcoming a little bit of rain. I've been running dogs every night, and you can see. You don't even have to watch a Garmin. You just look into the sun, and just see dust. So it's dry. So I know friends up in North Dakota are duck hunting right now, and they said it rained the whole time they're up there, and I said, well, you're lucky because we have zero water anywhere where I'm at. So
yeah, it's kind of crazy right now, honestly, with the drought. You know, we just came through, and having no water in the marsh. That's kind of that's kind of an interesting situation. But
yeah, I've been there since 2006. I just talked to the director up there with the DNR, and I said, I've never seen it so dry. And he goes, I've been there for 15, 16 years. And he says, I've never not seen water, at least in the canal that feeds it and drains it. So, but that kind of gives us a little segue to our guest tonight. And when I used to duck hunt, I saw these little birds all over, and this guy's nuts about them. So we have Scott Lindars here with us from sunny Florida. And
yeah, I don't think we've had anybody on from
Florida. I don't think
so
we got to put another pin on the map.
Hey, Scott, how's it going tonight?
Good evening, guys. It's going really good, and it's good to be on here, and excited to tell you a little bit about hunting down in Florida and Snipe and all the other things we get into. And congratulations on hitting episode 50. That's a big milestone.
We saved you. That was a special. Yeah, we saved you for this special one. But no, it's. Thomas is right. Up even here, I mean, in some of the damp areas that we often see around the cornfields and that kind of thing, a certain time of year, especially a little earlier in the spring maybe than now. But we tend to see snipe as well. We don't really think that much about it, And having followed your story, and then I first encountered a snipe hunt in Ireland a few years ago, and that's when it first came on my radar. And I think we spoke about that. But it sounds like you kind of have taken the snipe hunting kind of to that next level, and we'll talk about that in a minute. I think where we want to go first, though, is kind of talk about your hunting experience and what led you and how you got to Florida. I think you told me you grew up in New Jersey, but you really weren't in a hunting family, so to speak, at that time, right?
That's right. Yeah, grew up in New Jersey, exposed to a lot of woods and time outside. A lot of fishing with my father, but hunting wasn't anything we did. And it's funny, I go back there now. I go back into those, same woods that I played in as a kid. And now I see all the ducks and the deer and the turkey that as a kid I was almost oblivious to. So, gosh, I would have liked to have gone back there and been a hunter. But it wasn't until my early 20s. I went to college in Montana, University of Montana in Missoula. So it wasn't until getting out there that I started getting into hunting, and I showed up as a non-hunter, had never been exposed to it. And then over the course of one or two seasons. I met some friends that did it, started kind of going along, shadowing them for a season, just kind of following along on a hunt, seeing what it was all about for whitetail deer and mule deer. And then eventually started, doing my own big game hunting for deer, elk, and antelope. So kind of learned with friends, trial by fire. And then just one day, it was actually after class, we were out in a field workshop. I was in forestry, so we spent a lot of time out in the woods doing hands-on labs and things like that. And a couple of fellows said, "Hey, we're going to go out for a duck hunt afterwards. Tag along." I did. I didn't have any warm clothes, didn't have any of the gear, but I went out and sat in a blind that day with them, froze my butts off, and watched these guys, work ducks. And at that point, I think I was hooked on all things wing shooting, and quickly jumped in with both feet. The following year, started buying gear, going out on my own, doing it with more friends, and really kind of fell in love with wing shooting there. Would get into occasional grouse as well. More if we were down on the river bottom, trying to jump shoot ducks, you might encounter a grouse. So I got a little bit of side exposure to that. But that's really where it started. For those 5 great years I was out in Montana, and then sort of went on a forced sabbatical. Not by design, but had moved around a little bit. Was down in New Mexico. Was focused on other outdoor activities, doing a lot of whitewater rafting and kayaking at that time. Didn't take advantage of the hunting there, and then eventually came to Florida. Followed a girl and a job. I kept one of them for a while, that being the job. And again, initially, just kind of hung my hunting gear up. It was such a different environment, and everything about it was different than what you knew, whether that would have been deer hunting or duck hunting or upland. It was just a whole new world. And was really kind of put off by it at first. I talked to a few people, and it was, you got to have an airboat. It's out in the Everglades, and just didn't really have a good place to start. So I'd say the first 4 or 5 years, I was just kind of putting my outdoor time elsewhere. And by virtue of a good friend, Eric, his wife got him a Groupon for a duck hunt as a Christmas gift. He had never done it before, and I tagged along, and that was kind of how I got back into it down here in Florida, and was quickly reconnected it. And then we'll talk more in a minute of kind of where I took it from there. But that's kind of the brief history of how I started and what got me into it.
So you went to from not hunting at all to just jumping in head first, and it seems like there's a lot of people that do that, and then maybe they life comes up, they take a sabbatical like you said, and then now here you're back, you jump feet first into it. But the question, when Wade let me know that you were going to be on, and did some little research, and when I was a kid, like they'd send you off, Dad, your campground or something. Yeah, go on a snipe hunt. Nobody ever thought, what is a snipe? Now I duck hunt a lot, or used to anyway, and those little guys were flying around. We knew we could shoot them. I think we shot one once, and the dog went to look at it to pick it up, and it's like, well, there isn't much left of this.
Yeah.
And we're like, how do you eat it? How do you clean it? So, what attracted you to just, be the snipe guy? I want to say, I mean,
yeah. So I'm down here getting back into duck hunting, which was great. I also, was kind of reading a lot about, upland hunting, seeing other guys grouse hunting, woodcock hunting. Really liked the idea of getting a bird dog, and started kind of going down that path. We have a lot of dogs. We always have. They hadn't been hunting dogs before, but I guess in a sense, I put the let's put the dog before the bird, meaning we got a Brittany Spaniel, and of course I wanted to put him to work on upland, and I did my research and started reading, and in Florida we really have two options: quail, and there is some really good public land quail hunting. I'm sure we'll get there, but a lot of it is on private land, with pen birds and kind of pay to hunt. That really didn't appeal to me. So just really looking through FWC, Florida Fish and Wildlife, regulations. I too stumbled upon that. Hey, there's a snipe season. I hadn't ever heard of them other than the Boy Scout prank when I was a kid, that I'm sure we've all been exposed to, chasing around, looking, going around at night with a paper bag and a flashlight, being misguided by, the older Cub Scouts. So I Snipe, what is this? I started reading up on it, saw that we had a season, just did a little more research and found out that, hey, this is a bird that's actually pretty plentiful here. We have a nice, long, generous season, and decided, hey, that's where I'm going to try and put some energy. Hadn't really, as I said, been exposed to it, didn't know anyone. I actually just went on Instagram and was looking for, hashtag snipe hunting, and found a few other, guys that looked like they were doing it. Reached out to them to make some connections, get some introductions, get a little bit of advice from 2 or 3 people, and off I went. A guy named Tony cued me in on a spot on a piece of public land. I went down there on my own. That spot that day didn't turn up anything. And again, I didn't even know what I was looking for. I'd never seen a snipe flush in the wild. So I'm beating through this cover, and meadowlarks are flushing and this, and I know it's not the right bird, but I was just kind of trial by fire. And I said, here's another spot I found on the map. It looked interesting. On a whim, I drove over there and didn't get more than 25, 30 yards from the car, found what looked like a moist area, and boom, flushed the first snipe. Missed. It went down, I don't know, maybe 30 yards away. I put a mark on it, went over, and it flushed again. At that point, I made the shot and connected, and there it was, my first snipe, a solo experience on a piece of cover I found myself, and it was pretty damn rewarding. Had a really small meal that night, not that big, but after that, I really started enjoying it and put more time into it, and got to know some of these other snipe hunters that do it as well. And, the passion from there really took off.
So they kind of make a distinctive squawk when they fly. Am I a little correct on that?
Yeah,
They'll say like a shark tail will laugh at you, but these will make a squawking noise, so you can at least identify it when it does take off. It's not exactly
they call it
the
like
prettiest bird I've ever heard.
I guess officially it's called like a scrape is the noise, and you're right. Most of the time they do make that noise. A lot of times they won't though. It's definitely nice when they do. It gives you a little bit of an early warning signal when they do flush, that you'll hear them, because they're pretty erratic on which way they flush and everything. But it is an exciting flush, because when they get up, as you know, they're fast. They like to zigzag, and can be damn hard to shoot. I do a lot of missing.
What type of shotgun do you typically carry to go for?
These days, I use generally a 28 gauge side by side, just simple little everyday lead shells. I found 28's a really good gauge. I've shot them with everything from my 12 gauge duck gun to some old Ithaca 16 gauges and 20 gauge, but I like a little lightweight 28 gauge for ease of use, and it's light. You can carry it all day. But Yeah, there's really any gun you have. I've talked to other people about that in terms of what's the right gun, what's the right shell. It's to me, it's the one you have. It's the one that you can go out there and use. I like one of these. No, this is number 8, but number 8, 7.5 is kind of my go-to. I've shot them when I've been out duck hunting with number 3s, and there's usually not much left of them.
Yeah,
So,
that's the thing.
Kind of like a quail load you'd probably be looking for.
Yeah, and they don't, they only need one shot to go down. So,
for novice guys like Thomas and I, if we're going to go after snipe, what are some of the main things, I guess, that we should think about? I mean, is it kind of like the type of habitat that we're going to find them in, of course, which is they like moist areas along waterways and that kind of thing, I suspect. But what else about the snipe have you found to be critical to having a successful hunt?
Sure, yeah. I'd say the first thing to remember is they're a migratory bird. So they're, the snipe are probably just now starting to show up in Florida, but I would say not in any great numbers. I was talking to a guy in Alaska, and he's hunting snipe up there right now, and figures he's got another week or 10 days before they're all gonna head south. So I would think the majority of snipe that we receive are probably still up north and the upper U.S. states or even Canada, and are slowly going to make their way down. So that's one thing to keep in mind is it's just like a duck, it's migratory. So your timing is going to change throughout the year, and that window of when they're there will eclipse the further north you are. We get the nice luxury of being down here in Florida that this is where they come, and we have a really nice long season that runs from November 1st all the way into February. So a lot of opportunity, and as you get more cold fronts, they'll continue to come down. In terms of habitat, you hit the nail on the head. It's all about moisture. Finding that soft, moist ground. Snipe have a really long bill. This is not a snipe skull, but it's similar. You can see this is off of some other kind of shorebird we found, but they've got a long bill like this that they use to probe in the ground for worms and bugs and everything. So it's a pretty flexible bill. So they need to find that ground that they can easily, probe into. And I kind of like to think about, if I'm looking for habitat, if my feet are dry completely, I'm probably off the mark. If I'm up to my ankles, I'm off the mark as well. I'm in too deep usually. So you're really looking for that, either that just soggy ground that's been saturated from the rainy season, and that might be very far from water. I've got some spots I hunt that there's no visible pond far away, but it's received moisture all season long, so the ground stays soft. Or you're trying to get kind of on the edge of a pond. We call them flag ponds, little wetland areas where there's that transition zone from standing water to dry ground. So I think it's all about that margin, and it doesn't necessarily mean open cover. Like I said, we'll find them up in Salt Palmetto Flats. We'll find them up in myrtle bushes and other bits of cover, which is something I look for, because like any of these small birds, they have they need to evade predators. So there's hawks and eagles that are out for them. They want a place where they can either easily escape to or seek some refuge as the day goes on. So habitat wise, the number one is finding that soft ground, finding that transition zone. And then even throughout the day, in the morning, you're going to find them more out in the open, feeding like, most, birds would do. And then, so later in the day, you might work up into some thicker, denser cover where they're getting out of the heat, the sun, and getting away from predators.
Now, do they tend to bunch up, or do you find singles mostly, or is it kind of a mixed bag?
Yeah, it's a good question. You're not typically going to flush like a covey of quail where you're going to bust up, 10 all concentrated in one area. What you will do is come into an area where you'll kind of move from one to the other, or once one flushes and that first shot goes off, all of a sudden there's 2 or 3 more. You will see them get up in small pairs, but like I said, not a concentrated, covey flush where 10 go. But when you find the right area, you'll generally be kind of moving from one group of birds or the other. And sometimes that's the worst thing, is when you get on one, that shot goes off, or the dog goes out for a retrieve, and now all of a sudden, that second and third and fourth one starts busting because they're spooked or they feel the pressure, and all of a sudden you're moving through an area much quicker than you would want to. So it can get a little.
You don't want to find yourself with an empty gun, right?
Yeah, exactly. And
make the first shot count.
And I've learned, again, the hard way. It's often tempting to try and take that second shot with a dog. It's often easier to, retrieve them. But when I've shot 2, inevitably you're going to lose one of them because, they're hard to find, and you take your eye off that one mark, and now you're looking at the other one. That's one of the hardest things, I think, for someone without a dog is, once you make the shot, it is the retrieval part, because man, they're small little birds, and
there's grass.
I saw it right there. I walked right to that bush, and now you're spending 15 minutes.
So tell me, Scott, then how do you use the dog? Then tell us a little more about you're hunting snipe with a dog. So what is the strategy? Does that dog at heel, or is that dog going to point these snipe on the ground?
Yeah. I'll talk about my dog and how I hunt them, and then we can kind of go into other ways, because there is kind of 2 schools of thought on it. So I have a Brittany. He's learned to point them. It didn't come easy. The first season he was honestly more trouble than he was worth, outranging too far and just busting birds that were way out of reach. And like I was just saying, you get one up, and then now 2, 3 are going. But after a season or 2, he really figured out the game of working a lot more closely, and not on a heel, but out in front in shootable range where he can go on point and give me the opportunity to get in position. And again, they're not like a quail where you're going to walk right up to that bush and darn near have to kick it sometimes to flush them. They're definitely a more edgy bird. So once he goes on point or starts getting birdie, which I can tell by his body language, he'll get down and creep on them. I know to get into position or get ready. Conversely, there's a lot of other guys, and their school of thought is, I'm going to keep that dog at heel and really just use it for the retrieving part, and let my body be the flusher just by walking, which they will get up on you, just as easy, but you don't get that experience at the point in the early warning detection. And they can be really tricky. They will, a snipe will sometimes let you walk right past them and then flush on you. They also tend to respond to changes in the movement. So when I'm hunting, whether it's with a dog or without one in a small group, I like to move really slow, and I'll work to an area, and then sometimes the best thing to do is I'll just stop. And that change in sound that you're not moving after 4 or 5 seconds, that's when they'll flush. And if you were to keep walking, you're likely just to go right past them, and they'll hold tight. So, kind of my strategy is it's like someone who's skiing through the moguls. You're looking, you're seeing your line, 3-4 moves ahead. So I'm looking from this bush, and then I'm going to zigzag 5 yards over here, and then kind of, working back and forth where I see little pockets of potential cover, and get to each one of them, pause briefly, move slowly, and then work on to the next. And the dog, Remy, he's really good at kind of staying in sync with me, and we've kind of figured out that way to hunt together. So that's been really fun.
Yeah, in my experience, we get bored duck hunting. We're like, hey, we should try and get some snipe, and you got our marshes, and they have little water ponds. But yeah, we were in grass, 3-4 inches high, and you just squish, squish, squish. They probably hear you coming, and it kind of reminds me what we've been dealing with now with it being so dry. The dogs are loud in the grass. We're loud in the grass, but it seemed like we're working birds. They're just running. It's pretty easy for them right now. But I've noticed the last few nights that the dogs are getting birdie. They're kind of holding up on a kind of a point, and then they're like, well, it's moving. They can tell you, and you just keep moving them on. But as soon as I just stop everybody and make everybody stand in place, and then the birds seem to flush. And so
Yep.
I'm relating to you not only with the snipe, but as the pheasants that we're working right now. But, uh, how many does it take to get a decent meal?
Yeah, so they're small. I'd say body-wise, about the size of a quail or a dove. Definitely smaller than a woodcock. Most states, the limit is 8. To get a meal, I guess it depends on how many people you're serving, but you're really going to get just 2 little breasts and some really delicious legs. A lot of guys will just breast them out, but the little legs are great. You throw them on a grill or in some oil, and you got a little chicken wing to gnaw on. So if you've got 6 or 8, and it's you and your wife, or a couple, small group with a side or 2, you're going to be good to go. If it was just me eating them, 2 or 3 birds and a vegetable is going to make for a meal. But yeah, especially if you use the legs. I don't do it every time, but sometimes I'll pull the heart and the gizzard and add that into some rice. If it's a special hunt, and I want to use it all. But they are delicious to eat for sure. Taste wise, I'd put them in between, I'd say, a quail, dove, and a woodcock. Probably not as earthy as a woodcock, but closer to that. They're dark meat. They're eating the same things. They're eating bugs and worms, but they have a really, really good flavor. And like most, fowl and game, it's all about not overcooking it. If you overcook it, of course, it's gonna dry up and get that unpleasant taste to it. So we like to keep.
So do you pluck them,
nice
or do you just skin them?
Okay.
Do you pluck them or leave the skin on them and just get the feathers off them? I know pulling on them little guys.
No, it depends.
It just kind of pull apart.
And it probably depends on how many. If I've got only a couple and I've got the time, it's nice to pluck them. The skin's real thin, so it's not always successful to pluck them. But I think any bird's going to taste better with the skin on for sure. If I had a bigger amount and I was in a hurry, then I'm more likely to just take the breasts on them. But yeah, that's kind of my philosophy with turkey, with ducks. I think plucked is always the way to go. It's just a matter of do you have the time to get that done.
We are having some, for the folks watching, we are having some video issues. We're just hoping it corrects itself. So he does have some visual stuff for us to look at, but once we kind of get that refreshed, we will have him show that. As far as just hunting them in Florida, you've kind of done a little traveling, haven't you, doing the, chasing the great snipe?
Yeah, I've gone, taken a couple road trips with some friends over to Louisiana, which was a nice combination of going for snipe and woodcock and some waterfowl as well. I've gone up to Michigan for woodcock and grouse as well, and done a couple out of state duck hunts. But most of my snipe hunting is here in my backyard, which is why I like it, because I can get out and drive 35 minutes to an hour and be in any number of public land spots. Go out and get a hunt in for an hour, hour and a half before work, and wrap it up and be back sitting behind the day job by 9:30, 10. So it's a nice thing. There's a lot of opportunity, throughout the state, and it's not just a Florida thing. Every state but Hawaii has a snipe season. Now, how productive every state is, I don't know, but like I said, there's guys in California, from Alaska to New Jersey, there in the Midwest. So it really is an accessible bird that I'd say is often overlooked. And I would say check your state regs, find out your dates, and get after them, because it's a fun opportunity.
And we mentioned obviously you've got an interesting, cool shirt on, and we'll talk about Marshdoodle, and we talked about how the snipe is a relative of the woodcock, and they look similar, not in size, but they basically feed the same, and they're both migratory as well. But so what was the genesis of the Marshdoodle? Obviously, you probably found yourself really interested in this particular type of game bird, and it kind of turned into a business. How did that happen?
Yeah. I started the idea behind Marshdoodle, and really what led to it is, again, I was seeing, kind of falling in love with this upland idea, and seeing, all this heritage and tradition around grouse and woodcock, and grouse camp, and there was just like this whole culture around it that people were really passionate about, and of course, a lot of nicknames for the woodcock, from timberdoodle to marsh bat to swamp bat and all that. And I saw that there really wasn't something similar for snipe, and just I'm a creative person. I work in marketing, so I was kind of just playing with words and seeing, as you said, they're in the same family. They're in the sandpiper family. They're more or less cousins. They have similar habitat in the sense that they both key in on moist ground. Obviously, more woodland for the woodcock, and more marshy for the snipe. So that was kind of where the idea clicked of timberdoodle and Marshdoodle, and I put the two and two together. Kind of came up with the name, came up with some artwork for it, and did a little branding and merchandising around that. And I think guys that were into snipe really liked it as well, because again, there's no end of brands and merchandising for upland hunting, for duck hunting, for deer hunting. But if this is your passion, there really wasn't anything that you could kind of put your hat on or your badge on. So that was kind of the genesis, behind putting the Marshdoodle, merchandise and brand together.
One question that came to mind while we were talking about how they're migratory and everything, and when they nest, are they nesting on the ground? So, or are they nesting in trees, kind of like a wood duck? Or can you tell anything about how they do their nesting?
Yeah, I know it doesn't happen in Florida, so that would be, off in I guess, the springtime when they've migrated, back. But from my understanding, they'd be a ground nester as well. I've never seen. I mean, I've seen them perched on something, but they're not a tree bird. So yeah, I think they're making their way back up to Canada, the upper northern states, and ground nesting in probably similar marshy habitat. by the
We
time
kind
they're
of
getting
mentioned,
down here in Florida, they're all mature birds. You can typically tell a difference between, maybe a 1 year bird and a more mature one by the size of their feathers, the maturity of them, and also, one of the neat things you'll see is, the change in fat on that bird. If you do pluck it or when you're skinning it, it's kind of interesting when you'll see from the same hunt, a bird with a real thick amount of fat versus one that, doesn't have much. I'm not the avian biologist, but you got to think that one bird maybe was coming up from a much colder environment, stuck around a lot longer and put on a bigger fat reserve, and maybe that thinner one was hanging out, in the mid-Atlantic and came down, much earlier.
now, do the males, they have a little different color or any different features than what a female would have?
No, it's not. On a woodcock, you can sex them by the length of the bill pretty easily. There's this, get out a dollar bill, and if the bill is shorter or longer, you can tell generally a male and a female. But and snipe, they're pretty same sex. I've never been able to tell the difference between one or the other. On that topic of what they look like, I think one of the coolest things on them is these little tail fan feathers. They've got these great tail feathers, and I like to take a few of these each season. I fan it out just like you would a turkey mount, and pin it out with a little salt, and they make a nice little memento. So you can kind of see these are two different. Oops, this one's falling apart. Two different birds, but are definitely some different sizes. So maybe this one is a more mature one, and this is maybe a 1 year bird. But this is a fun little thing to do. If you ever do shoot, one, you want to make a memento of your first one, just cut that off just like you would a turkey, a couple pins, and throw some salt or some borax on it, and you get a nice little memento.
Yeah, I'm a little opposite everybody. I don't have the big turkey fan, but I have numerous pheasant fans around the house. People walk in like, what in the heck? I'm like, hey, it's not just one tail feather. I like to see the whole spread. So, yeah, so we're unique in that we, even just on little birds and pheasants, that we keep them around.
Yeah, and
I always
you
like
mentioned
to save a few feathers. I've got bags and bags of feathers sorted by all different species, and my wife always appreciates it come Thanksgiving when she wants to do tablescaping, that I can pull her out lots of good stuff to decorate with.
Gotta have it.
Yeah.
So you also do some quail hunting down there, as I understand it.
I do, yeah. I definitely would
like?
say in terms of attention and time, I put more into snipe and ducks, but I do get out for a few days of quail every year. We have some really good public land, habitat down here. There's I'd say most of the WMAs are, wildlife management areas. You can just do a walk on and get on some quail. We have one particular management area that is really heavily managed for quail. They do a great job. Some say it's probably the best quail public land east of the Mississippi, that is on a quota system, both either lottery, meaning you can only hunt a certain area, or it's a number of hunter days. But that's a really big culture down here. And again, speaking about things that are different in Florida, in this particular area, the way of hunting is very different. The ground is expansive. You're covering a lot of ground, and the predominant way you hunt the quail down here is from a swamp buggy, or even a pickup truck, or your UTV, and most guys will just drive their buggy and let the dog range out in front. And I think that a really good quail dog down here is good at ranging far out and going on a really solid point. and then giving you a chance to get up close and make the flush of it. But yeah, the swamp buggies are a pretty neat thing. They basically look like a open air monster truck with giant, truck tires and a huge engine and a platform on top that can hold, 4, 5, 6, guys. And then that's kind of the most common way you'll see people, hunting down here. I don't have one, so I use just the truck or, um, a side by side to hunt on. Now there are, other spots that's walk on only, and that's going to be, much more traditional, style hunting.
So along with that hunting, there probably comes some, I would say, some difficulties with wildlife.
Things that hunt you back.
Hunt you back down there, I would assume.
Yeah, that's another thing about Florida is talk about differences. Like Montana, you had to worry about grizzly bears. Here, it's snakes and alligators that you need to be, and panthers. I'd say of all the three, panthers bothered me the most. And then I'm probably worried about snakes and alligators after that. Especially during turkey hunting season. I've had the unfortunate experience of being stalked by a panther in the dark, and man, that'll just about ruin your experience when you're in the dark and you can hear a panther growling in the darkness, off in the shadows. That's not something I want to repeat. But from a upland hunting standpoint, the main thing we watch out for are snakes. Alligators, of course, are ever present in any body of water. The size of your bedroom has the potential to have an alligator in it. But back to what we were saying when we were talking about being on that edge and not being in too wet of an area, I don't get too concerned about it, because if I'm in deep water where there is an alligator, then I'm way off my mark and I'm not snipe hunting anymore. So with my dog, it's just if I see a big body of water or ditch, I'm going to keep him away from that. That's where I'm likely to encounter one. But just cruising through the uplands, I don't worry so much about that. It's the rattlesnake and the water moccasin that we care the most about, and a good Florida, and probably the same applies to say Texas or the Southwest. Dog hunter is going to get their dog trained on snake avoidance. So I've taken mine to the local NAVDA chapter, and once a year they hold a snake training clinic where they condition your dog to understand what a snake is and respond to it. So it doesn't take long. It's pretty neat. The first time I took Remy, the trainer takes him out with an e-collar on, and they've got 4 or 5 varieties of snake all spread out throughout a field, and caged up, of course. And they just kind of bring the dog up to it, set him up almost for failure, and as soon as that dog puts attention on it and signals that he's smelling it, they light it up with the e-collar aggressively, to the point where that dog does not want to do it. So we moved on from the first snake. He keyed in on it, got zapped. Second snake, same thing. Third snake, the dog winded. Just before even the zap came, he wanted nothing to do with it. So quickly put 2 and 2 together on the scent. The following day, we went back to reinforce it. Went back to that same field. I took him off the lead, and he ran straight back to the truck. He said, "I don't want anything to do with this field." That field zaps. And speaking of that, I got this cool thing. This is about just under a 6-foot rattlesnake. Wow. That we actually shot outside our bathroom window. I was in here working one day in my office, and my wife comes, I can hear her screaming from the other room. I'm like, "God, what is it now?" She calls me in, and outside the window, I can see this thing crawling up on our lawn, only 10, 15 feet outside of the window, which I quickly ran, got the shotgun, and took care of that with 3 dogs and a kid. I didn't want that one so close to home. But what's interesting now is, so I had this thing in the freezer for like a year and a half. And last year we had, Hurricane Ian come through. I lost power for like a week, and of course everything was starting to thaw out. So I said, no better time than to skin this thing out and start working on it. I was able to get the supplies to it, and ended up doing this little amateur mount. But if my dog were to walk in here right now and I even just shook this thing, he would be gone as he can gone.
So would I.
It's just be on the wall, but if I bring it to his attention or give it one little shake, he'll be in the bedroom, cowering. So that reinforcement works. And
have you encountered any?
I'll try to. Go on.
Have you encountered any snakes like that while you were hunting for birds? I mean, have you come across a snake like that?
Yeah, never had an issue with it with a dog, but we've definitely found a few and almost kind of stepped right over them, and that's probably why you've got to be cautious, because generally you're not going to know they're there till it's too late, especially in some thick cover. So fortunately, haven't had any bad incidents yet. But like I said, that's kind of the number one thing we look out for is the snake. And the avoidance training really helps, because I said, it's kind of like if you have an invisible fence. A year later, that dog could have not been on that property, but they'll come back and they're going to remember where that invisible fence line is, and that imprint is there. Usually at the beginning of the season, if we have an opportunity to find a snake, if you will, and reinforce that training, I like to do that to freshen it up.
And one thing for our listeners, when he's saying that they're reinforcement and they're really giving that dog the business with the e-collar, that is going to be a lot safer for that dog than getting bit by a snake, and a lot less painful, because where a dog's going to get bit by a snake, they're ground level, so they're going to go for the leg or something close to their body that's closer to their heart. Their necks or their face would even be worse. And I've seen dogs with snake bites and pictures, and they swell up, and if somebody doesn't get them to, especially a cottonmouth or a big snake like that, it's going to have a lot of venom. So that is, that's the way you have to do it, to really emphasize that dog. These are no, and you got to make it. So when you correct a dog and you want that habit to end, you really got to let them have it, and it don't take very much. But before we wrap up, Scott, we always like to finalize the podcast with your favorite dog story. So I know we kind of gave you a little heads up on this, but I'm betting you have one.
Yeah, and like I said, in the beginning, my first season or two, he was learning, I was learning, and I'd say one of my favorite memories was hunting with my buddy Matt, who I got into snipe hunting with. One of those fellas I kind of found on Instagram, and actually tracked him down by accident. I was out doing some snipe hunting. I saw his truck. I said, I know that truck from this guy's Instagram profile. And I didn't see him, but we later met up and crossed paths and became good friends. But we had an opportunity to go hunt on a little piece of private land. It was an old orchard, an old orange orchard, which makes for great habitat, because when they make an orchard, it's rows and rows of high ground where they plow the dirt, and then a little dip. So just imagine this patchwork of, or this line of corduroy, if you will, with water in the middle and high ground. So that edge habitat I was describing, tons of that. And we would work row to row. But that particular day we went over there, it had never been hunted for snipe before. We were the first ones to ever go on there. And that was a day where it really all clicked with the dog, and watching him go on that first like perfect point, just solid as can be. Matt came in, for the flush and the shot, followed by the retrieve. I think that was the best, memory where I kind of got to see it all come together. Got to be standing back watching it, not doing the shooting, which I like to do. I love taking other people out and watching them have the experience and being able to step back from it. But that kind of showed me that, hey, this dog, this Brittany, has learned the game, has learned to really slow down and hold tight. And I'd say that's probably one of the sharpest memories.
Yeah, it's amazing when they just finally put it all together. That light bulb goes on, and it's always good when you got your buddy along. They can see it, and then you can kind of stand back and watch it all transpire. And I think that's kind of why we all hunt with. You don't hear many guys that do upland hunting just by themselves. They either got a hunting buddy, and somebody's always got a dog. It's just something that it's a camaraderie that we all share and be able to talk about it. And we were 100% thankful for you for joining us. You're an hour ahead of us, so it's probably dark and very dark down there so far.
Yeah,
so.
It's solidly dark, but man, time goes by quick.
We thank you because
it's a nice prelude to get me mentally warmed up for our snipe season, which starts on November 1st. And instead, probably where you are, you're well into it, but ours kicks in November 1st, and we've got a nice long season ahead, which is a nice thing about Florida. We have our quote unquote wing shooting season starts on September 1st with Gallinoo or moorhen, and it runs all the way through March 15th when quail season ends. So we can be out there shooting something on the wing continuously for I think, what's that, about 7 months, which is just a lot of fun. And I always kick it off Labor Day weekend with moorhen, and then we're under some early teal in September, and it's on to snipe, and we get our duck season, and then we carry on with snipe and quail late into the winter.
Well, we appreciate you taking the time to come on. Hopefully our Midwest listeners will have a little different view of the snipe from now on. We hope that we've kind of shed a little light on that. I know I will, and I'll probably be looking for those little guys along that field when we're out there chasing pheasants here maybe this year. But like I said, we appreciate it. Stay safe down there, and give it hell in November when the season starts.
Absolutely. I'm gearing up for it mentally and physically. Got our plans set for opening weekend. Falls, I think, on a Thursday or a Wednesday this year. So I may or may not get out on opening day, but certainly that first full weekend, I know we'll be out there hitting it hard.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. We appreciate it. We'll probably check in with you again. And, man, that's kind of interesting. I mean, that's a bird that we really don't say much about or hear about. And, but, hopefully I saw them and they're fast, and we'll maybe run into one of those guys here in Iowa at some point, and we'll remember what Scott has told us, how they hunt and how they fly and how to go after them. But that being said, make sure you subscribe to this episode and the other episodes, and, be sure to take somebody hunting.
Keep their nose in the wind.